Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Monday, March 14th, and the Hokies are ACC champions in 2022. Episode 229 of the Tech Sideline Podcast will be an all-hoops edition of the podcast as we look back at the crazy week for the men's team in Brooklyn, and we'll also look ahead at March Madness games for the men's and women's team coming up on Friday. All of that and much more coming up on episode 229 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. Welcome into the Tech Sideline Podcast, however you are taking it in, whether that's archived on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, or archived on our YouTube channel. Be sure, if you are on our YouTube channel, like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. That way you know when the podcast goes live every week. And if you're in the live chat, be sure to drop a comment or question for Will and Chris. We'll get to those at the end of the show. As always, the Tech Sideline Podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. You can help bring Olympic hopeful athletes to Blacksburg and help build one of the best and fastest growing wrestling programs in the nation. Visit southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. Very special edition of the podcast. Not very often, actually, never has there been a podcast after an ACC men's basketball championship. First one in program history. We got Will Stewart, founder and general manager of TechSideline.com, across the way. Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist of TechSideline.com, to my right. Coming soon in the fourth chair, we will have the managing editor, David Cunningham. David, it's been a long week for David. He was at the women's tournament. He was at the men's tournament. Did not sleep Saturday night after the championship. Came all the way back to Blacksburg.
And then immediately started working.
For a selection show last night for the women's team. So we're going to give him a slide on the first half. He'll be here for the second half of the podcast. Malcolm Stewart, best podcast producer in the land, back behind the scenes. And I'm your host, Jake Lyman. Going to be a lot of fun today, guys, talking about what was a crazy week in Brooklyn. I was there as well. You kind of it feels like a dream. It felt surreal that you were there, to be there in that moment. And if you were on the YouTube chat, middle of the table, I got some confetti from the floor, so you can see that right in front of the basketball. That was on the Barclays Center floor after they won. Nice. Got to watch them cut down the nets. A really cool experience up there. And
So the other thing we have is the little basketball in the middle of the table is Chris and I, as we talked about, had the good fortune to sit in some of the premium seats for the Louisville game. So that's a little collector basketball that is initialed by the entire team.
Wow.
So suddenly the value of that thing went up.
Definitely cool to have some. We usually have the football helmets on there, but an all basketball show, had to get some basketball memorabilia.
We also have to mention that next to me is Chris Coleman's.
That's my game-worn Zabian Dowdell jersey from 2003-2004 when he was a freshman. That's the first time Virginia Tech ever wore black basketball uniforms.
Wow. So it's game-worn, huh? It doesn't have his name on it.
It doesn't have his name on it, but that was worn in the Pitt game in 2003-2004 when he was a freshman. And I believe that was a non-televised game, so nobody had ever seen those jerseys before.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. It's got the number 1 on it, and that's who the Hokies are right now.
That's right.
Hokies number 1 in the ACC this year. First ever ACC championship. We're going to go game by game through the tournament on this episode. We'll look at Clemson with Darius Maddox's buzzer beater, the Hokies' hot shooting night against Notre Dame, and obviously the two big wins where the walk-ons got in at the end against the Blue Bloods, North Carolina, and Duke in the semis and the championship. But let's look big picture. Obviously, first one in program history. What does this mean long-term for this program to take home the title in the media capital of the world in New York and beating teams like they did on the way?
I think we'll see an uptick in ticket sales next year.
Yeah.
I think you'll see more interest in the program. Not that you didn't see interest in it already. I mean, the students were already doing a great job filling up that place, but I think you'll see regular fans become more invested now. And
the timing of this is really good with the Castle Coliseum expansion coming along.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, get that $40 million donation in right now. You've got a little more leverage for that. Let's capitalize on this thing, right? Let's capitalize on it from a fan base standpoint, from a construction standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint. Every time Mike Young walks into a high school gym now, he can wear an ACC champions t-shirt, you know. Virginia Tech is ACC champions.
Just pass them out.
I mean, that you should be able to get anybody to at least listen to what you have to say if you say you're the ACC champions.
So what is the meme on Twitter? It's like the wrestling guy is like McMahon strutting into the Coliseum.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was the typical Vince McMahon entrance.
Right.
When he made himself into a bad guy.
Yeah,
it was great.
It's Mike Young walking into every room for probably the next 6 months until next season. Yeah. And for those who are listening and not watching, Chris already has his ACC Champions T-shirt on today.
I couldn't wait. I had an opportunity to get one yesterday, so figured it was appropriate attire for the podcast today.
So here's the sales pitch. We are a Fanatics affiliate, and I can tell you that Fanatics has some great reporting tools, and I can tell you that the things blew up yesterday for our Fanatics affiliation. Yeah. People ordered a lot of ACC Champions gear. I don't think we've got it threaded into the mobile site very well, but if you go to the site on a laptop or tablet or desktop, you can see the Fanatics ads. So hit them and grab yourself a T-shirt.
Yeah, go get yourself some championship gear. Again, hadn't happened. Tech hadn't played in an ACC or a conference championship game since 1984, so it doesn't happen very often.
Very good. I was afraid. So everybody remembers that Tech won the Metro Conference in 1979, and it's interesting, me and my college buddies had this discussion, and they did not remember that Tech played in the Metro Conference championship game in 1984. That was my freshman year, and I remember sitting in the dorm TV room. Dorms had TV rooms back then.
Yeah.
You know, because kids didn't have TV.
Yeah, when I was in school, they were pool table rooms.
The lobbies are So, and I remember sitting there watching, and I believe it was Florida State that beat Tech that year. I don't know. I don't really care.
Yes, I only know that because guess what? I had David Cunningham and Bill Roth with me in Brooklyn, and they were telling us all these stories. Obviously, the last banner game the Hokies played was in New York, the NIT in 1995, I believe. Bill was talking a lot about that. Want to talk about, you mentioned fan base, want to talk about the fans meeting the bus back at Hahn Hurst yesterday. It looked like a great crowd out there.
Oh, it was a fantastic crowd, and it was out of control. It was a madhouse. Now, first, it was nice and calm. Like, everybody, I don't know if you know what the front of Hahn Hurst looks like, but there's an area where you can drive up to. It's like a roundabout or whatever. And everybody was formed on each side of the road there.
In orderly fashion.
Unfortunately, there were no barriers. And there were only 3 cops. And the cops came through and said, okay, everybody stand back. And then they cleared a little path up to the front of the Hahn Hurst Center for all the players to walk through. Then the bus pulled up and stopped on Washington Street. And the plan was for the players to walk through the opening towards Hahn Hurst. I had a great spot for it. I was in the front row. I'm sitting there like, oh, I'm going to have great shots of this, But then the crowd turned into a riot, basically. I'm glad nobody got trampled, honestly. Like everybody ran past me, and the players actually had to physically force their way through the crowd into Hahn Hurst. It was incredible. There just wasn't enough police force there to organize everything, and I wonder if they had it to do over again if they would have just opened up Castle Coliseum and honored both the women's team and the men's team or something like that. I don't know. But at any rate, it was cool to see that kind of turnout and that kind of enthusiasm. Because it was cold, man. It was cold and windy, and it wasn't. So some people got out there at like 5:30 to make sure they had a spot.
Well, and their flight was delayed too a little bit, so
they didn't get there till 7:30.
Wow.
So they flew into Roanoke.
I don't know why they didn't fly into Blacksburg, because generally they can fly in and out of Blacksburg. Now maybe they just maybe they took a bigger contingent of people since it was the ACC tournament and they needed a longer runway. I don't know.
And you mentioned it was cold. I want to shout out Nick Brown. He tweeted out. And Nick Brown, usually in our fourth chair at times, he tweeted out, I want to say Saturday morning, it's going to be a polar vortex tonight or something, 20 degrees Fahrenheit tonight. And then later on, he tweeted out a scene of downtown Blacksburg after Tech had won the championship. And he said, there are plenty of guys without shirts on who did not heed my advice.
Oh my gosh. It was great. Okay, so Friday night, I went out to watch the game. It was extremely warm Friday. I went out with a short sleeve shirt and no jacket. And even when I got home late that night, it was still warm.
Not bad, yeah.
And then I woke up on Saturday morning and looked out the window and it was like, what is that white stuff? It's incredible.
So you didn't know that was coming?
No, I don't pay attention.
Oh, my wife tells me about the weather every day, man, so I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Supposedly the cops finally had to block off at least an intersection.
Oh, okay.
Some shirtless dude crowd surfed across Main Street.
I saw that on one of my friends' Snapchat. I didn't see it myself. No, I was walking to Hokie House around probably midnight to meet friends, and I saw all the cop cars there, and there were like 6 of them right at the section of College Avenue and Main Street. And I saw the videos from earlier, and basically the mass of humanity there had stopped traffic, and this one shirtless guy crowd surf from one side of Main Street to in front of Sharky's. There was a couch in the middle of Main Street.
Where'd that come from?
I don't know. There's no residential areas right there.
I think there's
right
some
there in front of Main
apartments.
Street. Maybe.
So you were talking about the 1995 NIT, and I remember, of course, that was a night game, and I remember watching it in Champs with my buddy Glenn Bywater, and as soon as the game ended, I left to go home. I was living in Christiansburg, and as I was driving away from Champs, I kind of looked around and thought, oh, people are spilling out into the street. So that 1995 NIT championship had the same effect. People just poured out into the street in downtown and partied.
The crazy thing is, this was during spring break. If not all the students were back yet. It would have been really a madhouse if all the students had been in town. It kind of reminded me a little bit of after Virginia Tech beat Ohio State in football.
Yeah,
it was similar to that to a certain extent. Now, I will say, I watched this game at Champs, and I put a bunch of videos up on my Twitter account of the crowd at Champs, and even the videos don't do it justice. It was the best bar crowd I've ever been a part of for a Virginia Tech sporting event. There were people sitting on the floor to have room to watch the game. After the game, there were people standing on tables and chairs in the bar and everything like that. As the whole bar sang Enter Sandman. It was an amazing experience. Like, after Tech beat UNC, I'm sitting there toying with, I'm thinking about going to New York City, and I'll just crash on David Cunningham's floor. And I didn't do it, and I've sat there all day on Saturday like I really wish I'd done it. And yes, part of me still wishes I'd gone up there to witness it in person. But if I'd gone up there to witness it in person and then heard about everything that happened in Blacksburg, I would have also regretted not being able to celebrate it in Blacksburg in that atmosphere.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, so you wish you could.
There are no losers.
Yeah,
here.
I mean,
No.
if that's my worst problem out of the weekend, then I guess we're doing okay.
And I got to say, the crowd in New York, being there for the first 2 Duke games, Syracuse and Miami, it was all Duke fans. Mm-hmm. It was loud. They were playing Every Time We Touch, and the whole crowd's dancing, which it's their thing. It's a weird tradition, by the way,
right.
I have to say. But the second time, they played it twice during the championship game. The second time, the band played it, and there were not many Duke fans on their feet. I want to say it was a 10-point game at that point. They were not as excited the second time. Enter Sandman came on late in the game, and it was mostly Tech fans at that point.
So I imagine a lot of the neutrals there were pulling for Tech.
Yes, especially, well, it was funny because the night before, all the Duke fans were rooting for Tech too,
right?
Because Tech was playing UNC.
That's true.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you were there. Watching it on television, there just didn't seem to be much crowd noise at all. So go over, how big is the Barclays Center? How many people were there? You just mentioned that Duke people were rooting for Tech against UNC. Did the UNC people come in for the championship game and root for Tech against Duke? So go over all that.
Well, so it was, I would have to say, if I look at all of the crowd members that I saw throughout the week, at least 60% of them were Duke fans, and probably 30% of them were Syracuse fans, just because it's in New York, right. And Syracuse fans travel decently well. But on Saturday night, I think a lot of Tech fans did make the trip up, because there were twice as many Tech fans for the championship game as there were for the semifinal game.
Right.
Barclays Center, I want to say, holds a little over 20,000 people.
That sounds about right.
And it was, at tip-off, I want to say at least 95% full. There on Tuesday, you look all the way back at the beginning of the tournament, there were probably about 1,000 people in there. Yeah. It was packed pretty much to the gills for the championship game on Saturday.
Then I have to say that ESPN did an extraordinarily poor job miking the crowd.
It's partially, I thought it was weird because it's honestly kind of like watching a game in Castle or even like in old Madison Square Garden. Like,
yeah, MSG
they black out the crowd. You can't tell how big the crowd is and everything like that because it's kind of blacked out and so far away from everything.
And thinking back, I want to say the crowd on Saturday wasn't as good as Friday. I think the semifinal game crowds were better. Duke Miami was loud. When Duke went on that run at the very end to pull away, it was loud in there. It never got that loud on Saturday
Duke
night.
fans didn't have much to cheer about on Saturday
It's
night.
true.
Did they?
It's true.
Yeah, so one thing I have not had a chance to do is to, because I worked 11 hours yesterday just doing stuff, I have not had a chance to sit down and watch the championship game through the filter of knowing that Tech was going to win.
Yeah, I have. Obviously, I watched the game at Champs, so I couldn't really hear any volume. So I haven't watched the broadcast with volume and anything like that. Now, one good thing you can do is you can go to Hokie Sports and go to their video page, and they've got game highlights. They've got all the interviews, like the 10-minute interview with Storm Murphy and Mike Young from the ACC Network after the game, the interview with Hunter Couture, the post-game press conference. They've got so much stuff on there on that Hokie Sports video page where you can kind of relive the moment, which I recommend everybody to do. Watch all of that stuff.
So when I rewatch it, what I'm going to look for is, there was a replay where I was later on. I don't know. It was kind of on. We weren't really watching it, but it struck me how stunned the Duke players looked from a certain point. Now, I'm not talking about the last 2.5 minutes when Mutz dunked on Banchero and you knew it was over. When I rewatch it, I'm going to be looking for the moment where I'm like, Duke looks like they know they can't win.
I thought, honestly, like early in the second half, all right, Duke came out and turned the ball over, and then Tech went down the court and scored quickly. And Coach K called a timeout, and you don't see that
25 seconds
into the half. You don't see that. And when they came back from commercial, they showed him using one of his assistant coaches to like physically demonstrate how to move for positioning and how to defend and things like that. If you still got to be teaching those fundamentals in March by calling a timeout during the middle of the ACC tournament, then you've got some issues. And I think Duke has not played good basketball over their last 4 or 5 games. I mean, they got smoked by Carolina. Syracuse without Boeheim had no business playing them that close. Right. Miami almost beat them, and obviously then Tech handled them. So I want to say I saw something where 2 of their 4 least efficient games this year have come in the last week.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they look like, and so. Watching the tournament, the series on the ACC network, and I've always, don't get me wrong, I don't like Duke. I don't like Mike Krzyzewski, but I really respect what he did. He had this, and I've said this before, he did 3 things. Number one, he inherited a good program, don't get me wrong, but he built them up to a championship level team. Then he maintained it when the whole world was against him. He knew that once they got to that top level, every game was going to be the opponent's biggest game, and yet he still managed excellence through that. And then he managed the transition to the one-and-done era pretty well, but and of course he's out of time now, but I wonder if he had another 10 or 15 years on his career, if he would pivot back a little bit to recruiting the next level of players, guys he could actually keep for 3 and 4 years. He's an excellent coach. And his recent vintage teams, for example, they just don't play defense like they used to.
I mean, when you have to, like, if you get some continuity on his teams, and he wouldn't have to call timeout 25 seconds into a half in an ACC championship game to teach his team how to play defense, because he would have already been teaching them for 2 or 3 years. Yes, I don't think the one-and-done stuff has been to Duke's benefit, quite frankly. And you see teams like Villanova and Virginia winning national championships.
Texas Tech played against Virginia for the national championship.
And Butler played for 2 straight national championships, and Gonzaga played for a national championship. And that's why, to me, college basketball is the superior product over college football right now, because there is parity. And the transfer portal, I think, has actually created even more parity. I don't think there's that many great, truly elite teams, but there's a lot of good teams.
So how would you like to be Mike Young right now, having just won the ACC championship? And we'll see what happens with Mutz and Aluma. Let's say neither one of them comes back. How would you like to be Mike Young shopping in the transfer portal right now for a post player? Again, you're Vince McMahon walking into the arena. You're like, you, young man, can come in and be the difference in this team. We need post players. Let's come and let's win another championship.
It definitely helps trying to bring in people who want to win right now out of the transfer portal, and should be helpful in getting some high school kids into the fold as well.
So let me, but before we move on, you asked kind of early on, what does this mean? I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. So people were like, you got to write a column. I wrote a column last night, and it ran late last night today. But I wasn't ready yet because I still haven't grasped what I just saw. but I'm getting little hints of it. That when I go to the ACC tournament page on Wikipedia now, the list of championships by school, there's not a 0 next to Virginia Tech anymore.
There's still a 0 next to Clemson, and they've been in the league for 70 years.
There's a 0 next to Clemson, Louisville, Pitt, Syracuse, probably one other team. I can't.
There might be one more.
Well, Notre Dame's won one. There might be one more, but all I know is there's not a 0 next to Tech's name anymore, and it's just the true glory of it, if you want to use the word, will come out. It'll in bits and pieces over weeks and months. It'll really settle in, and you'll be like, man, they actually went and did that.
Think about it. Virginia historically has been a really good basketball program. Yeah. They've only won 3 ACC tournaments,
and 2 of them were recent,
right? And they have been in the ACC for 50 years longer than Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult tournament to win unless you're Duke or Carolina, I guess. I think it won't be the last ACC tournament that Virginia Tech wins, in my opinion, but it's such a unique feeling. You'll never have this feeling again as a fan, because it's like when Virginia Tech won their first ACC title in their first year in the league. To me, that was the best ACC championship.
In football.
Yeah, in football. None of the others measured up to it because it was the first. And not only was it the first, it was achieved under adverse circumstances, like starting 2-2, losing at home to NC State, and you're not ranked in the top 25, and you weren't picked to be very good that year anyway. So, but then out of nowhere comes an ACC championship in our first year, and then this year you start off 10-10, and
2-7,
2-7 in the league, dead last, and then you win 13 out of your last 15, and you win the ACC. And you beat the top 3 seeds in the tournament,
including North Carolina and Duke.
Right? And it's the first ACC championship. And I'm not saying any future ACC championships won't feel great. Maybe they will measure up to it in certain ways, but this is so unique. You'll never have this exact feeling again as a fan ever.
And they didn't back into it. They did not back into it.
That was the impressive thing is. They kept getting better the whole tournament as the competition level increased.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, they played very good basketball for about 33 minutes against Clemson, and then almost blew it, but they didn't, thanks to Darius Maddox. And then they did pretty much put a complete game together against Notre Dame, an NCAA tournament team. Put a complete game together against North Carolina, an NCAA tournament team. Put a complete game together against Duke, an NCAA tournament team.
number 2 seed.
As the level of the competition got better each time, Tech played better. And that's crazy considering they had to win four games in 4 days. I mean, Tech smoked Carolina. Carolina didn't even have to break a sweat the previous night against UVA.
Yeah.
They crushed them.
They were up 33-13 at the half.
Halftime.
That UVA offensive performance may have been one of the worst I have ever witnessed.
Carolina shot like 38% in the first half against UVA, and they were still up by however many.
UVA, 13 points in the first half, the lowest in the shot clock era in ACC tournament history.
You know, if Tony Bennett's an outstanding basketball coach, their talent level, though, if he wasn't coaching them, they would have only won 12 or 13 games this year. Yeah. They've just dropped off a map from a talent standpoint. And
so the 4 games in 4 days thing. First of all, if you haven't heard the stat, it's not the first time it's been done. Somebody else did it.
Duke. But here's what I'm wondering. I haven't looked this up. Did Duke play any overtime games in that 2017? They made their run in 2017.
Really?
If they didn't play any overtime games this year, that means Virginia Tech played the most minutes in an ACC tournament game and to go on to win the ACC tournament.
And so watching, as I was working yesterday, I had a few. I had Texas A&M on against who'd they play? Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think A&M had to play 4 games, and the announcers were talking about how A&M looked tired. Virginia Tech never looked tired. It's remarkable.
Well, and it was the exact same scenario as well. They played overtime in the first game, won 2 in a row after that, and then had to play the 4th in 4 days, and they ran out of gas.
Coach K actually talked about that after the game. He said, he said, I know theoretically we had an extra day of rest, but he basically said we were the more tired team we let it affect us because older players, which Virginia Tech has, tend to manage fatigue better. That they don't let it affect them mentally as much as freshmen.
I'm telling you,
right? So he ought to know at this point after coaching so many freshmen throughout the years. Right?
I wonder if he wishes he had another 10 or 15 years to try something different.
I don't know. I wonder if part of it is like he's using Duke to audition for his own Olympic team. It's just a thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something we'll never know because that was Coach K's final ACC game. Now he gets one last chance in the NCAA tournament as a 2 seed. We'll see what happens from there. You guys mentioned the 4 games in 4 days. Let's go through them. Let's start with Clemson. The biggest what if of the tournament. If Darius Maddox doesn't hit that shot, Virginia Tech, not an NCAA tournament team, not an ACC champion, but guess what? He did.
Then we're forced into pretending like we care about the NIT.
Yes.
That's what we'd be talking about right now, and I wouldn't want to talk about it, but I guess I'd have to pretend.
You would have to.
Yeah, so thank God he hit that shot. Because we wouldn't be having what a magical moment, though. Of course,
yes.
The March Maddox.
Maddox.
So many magical things came out of this because theoretically, like Hunter Couture got the tournament MVP. Could have just as easily been Keve Aluma. Could have just as easily been Darius Maddox. Could have just as easily been Storm Murphy, who had a brilliant tournament. And that's the Virginia Tech team we expected this year. As a whole, there's so many good players on this team. It could theoretically be anybody, any night. Yep. Well, except for probably Gasson, who's probably not a double-digit threat. But even in that one game, was it Clemson or Notre Dame, where he scored 7 quick points in the first half and was a big factor in the win. So everybody Tech took to New York contributed. Everybody they put on the court contributed. And obviously, Darius Maddox has a nickname now that no one will ever forget, and I believe he needs to capitalize that when it comes to NIL opportunities.
And so just looking at that game, we'll all remember the shot, but I will also remember, and I put this in today's column, I had the tweet lined up. It said, with 6.7 seconds left to go, Virginia Tech getting ready to throw the ball inbounds. My tweet said, final, Clemson 75. Was that
70, it would have been 75-73.
Clemson 75, Virginia Tech 73. Hokies led 59-48, I think it was, with 7 minutes left to go, and got outscored 27-14 down the stretch. No NCAA tournament for Virginia Tech. And I was sitting there waiting. I got a touchscreen laptop. I was sitting there waiting for the final play, and then I was going to click tweet. And I had to erase it. And it was just me alone in my basement just watching this game and tweeting.
I can't believe they let Darius Maddox bring the ball up the court and not get it in his face ever at all.
They being Clemson. That was
yeah.
He looked so casual.
Yeah. I mean, he made that behind the back dribble and just
I'm lining you up, here it comes.
Yeah, I mean that guy can make a shot with not much, with very little space. That they gave him too much space, and they just allowed Virginia Tech to bring the ball up the court too easily, in my opinion. Because Tech didn't have time to set up for Tech doesn't have any really great drivers on this team outside for probably Padua. And they didn't have time to draw up a set play for a 2-pointer. That had to be a 3. And Clemson just backed off.
And by the way, Mike Young put in all his guards, all his three-point shooters.
So you knew what was probably coming. I mean, Maddox had the option to drive or take a 3-pointer. Considering his own skill set, he made absolutely the correct decision. I'm so glad he took a 3-pointer there instead of driving, because I think Tech is more likely to make a 3-pointer in that situation than they are taking somebody off a dribble drive.
He doesn't have a classically beautiful jump shot, but one thing he does is he elevates quickly and gets the ball off quickly. And if you go back and watch that shot, there's nothing the Clemson guy can do. He's too far off of him. And Maddox has that ability, and you see this in his mid-range game when he's on the wing and he takes those 1 or 2 dribbles and elevates on the baseline about 10 or 12 feet out. That shot is wide open. People really struggle to guard that. And what the Clemson defender got in that moment was a little mini version of that, where he probably thought his defense was okay. It really wasn't. That was a wide
against a normal human being. That's fine.
Yeah,
like against a guy who's more likely to score on you off a drive. He did the right thing. That's not the case with Darius Maddox at all.
Yeah.
And so much had to go right down the stretch for Tech to win it. We talked about they had an 11-point lead with under 8 minutes to play, but really Clemson controlled that thing at the very end. And the shot that everybody forgets is Storm Murphy's 3 towards the end of regulation to give the Hokies a 2-point lead. I want to say 66-64 after he hit that.
Yes.
And then
PJ Hall goes down. That was a nice shot by Hall.
Hall is extremely impressive. Like, if they gave a tough guy award of the ACC tournament, it's Hall. That guy could barely walk for part of that game.
Yeah.
He clearly re-injured his foot in that game, and he stayed in it. And seemed to have a shoulder injury, pick up a shoulder injury during the course of the game too. So that guy was out there. You could tell he was hurting, and he stayed in it and played a really good game. You could see why Mike Young recruited him so hard.
So Jake, you were there in the arena,
yes.
So you didn't get this, but clearly the ESPN announcers had been briefed heavily on PJ Hall. It was the PJ Hall show. It was like a big, long 2-hour infomercial on PJ Hall. And people were just joking about it on Twitter, like, well, there's 2 teams in this game, right? And even Clemson has other players other than PJ Hall.
Didn't seem like it towards the end there. It was all PJ Hall for about the final 3 minutes in overtime. Yeah. And then in overtime, you go to overtime. Storm Murphy hit his 5th 3 of the game. He had 4. He went 4 for 4 in the first half.
Yeah, he was 5 of 8 overall.
He was phenomenal in that game. Really, kind of the guy everyone expected him to be coming over from Wofford.
Yeah,
and that's why he was named to the second team all-tournament team. But in overtime, I think where I may have given up was when Justin Mutz missed the front end or the first free throw, and then Mike Young called timeout. I was actually broadcasting that game for 3304 Sports, and I said, I think he's drawing up a play for him to miss it and try and get the ball back and score 2. And he didn't. Made it a 1-point game, and thankfully Clemson missed a free throw on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, people are talking about Tech's free throw shooting, Hunter Couture missing 3, which is not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But then PJ Hall, who's an 80% free throw shooter, missed that one late, and that meant Darius Maddox's 3-pointer gave Virginia Tech the win instead of the tie.
Well, and Clemson would have fouled instead of letting him take that shot.
You would think, yeah.
So that
everything, like you said, had to go just right.
Everything had to go just right. And again, the biggest what if in history, if Darius Maddox doesn't hit that shot, Virginia Tech, probably an NIT team. Instead, they got to play against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm writing spring practice articles this week instead of basketball articles. If Darius Maddox doesn't make that shot.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. Looking at the bracket before the tournament started, you knew that Clemson, either one of those teams, Clemson or NC State, could beat Tech. NC State's got the athleticism to do it. They're very poorly coached, but they have the athleticism to do it. And Clemson had out-toughed Tech in the previous game. So, okay, let's see who wins that one and try to get by that one. Now, the next game, you're getting ready to talk about Notre Dame.
Let's talk Notre Dame.
I like that matchup.
And I think everybody did. I think that's why everyone wanted Tech to be the 7th seed, was to set up that second-round matchup with Notre Dame.
You said on this podcast last week and talked about that very thing, about how Virginia Tech was set up perfectly to make a run in the ACC tournament with, Clemson or NC State, and then Notre Dame Notre Dame, your number 2 seed in the ACC tournament, of course, but not as strong as a typical number 2 seed. Your typical number 2 seed in the ACC tournament is a national title contender.
Yes.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's a play-in. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, and so the only thing that made me – so there's a couple of things about, everybody talks about Tech being 2-7, but Tech was 0-4.
Right.
And they beat Notre Dame, and that was a huge win that not a lot of people are talking about. But the other thing that happened in that game that gave me pause about the ACC tournament was that I think his first name is Paul Atkinson Jr.
Yes.
He got in foul trouble and wasn't a factor in that first game. He didn't get in foul trouble in the ACC tournament, and he wasn't a factor. So I thought, we'll get into the details of the game, but to me, I thought Notre Dame played a good game. They shot well. Cormac Ryan was really clutch, but every time they tried to make a run, Tech answered.
Yeah, I think when you look at the efficiency ratings of each team, both teams have excellent offensive efficiency ratings. Mike Bray's always been an excellent offensive coach. Mike Young's always been an excellent offensive coach. I think I read our boards after the game, and some people were talking about Tech's lack of defense. I think it was more of just 2 elite offenses going at each other. Two teams that really know how to execute on the offensive end, and that's what made it for a very entertaining basketball game. If it had gone, if it was an NBA game and it had been 48 minutes instead of 40, you would have seen an NBA score line. You would have seen 104-98 final score or something like that.
Yeah. So I've told this story before. Shortly after Mike Bray started at Notre Dame, it was back when Tech was in the Big East, and I think Ricky Stokes was coaching Tech. Notre Dame came into Castle, and I remember a play where, they blew Tech out, I'm sure. And I remember a play where Notre Dame got a defensive rebound and got a layup at the other end, and the ball never touched the floor.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, that's a really well-coached team. And I didn't know anything about Mike Bray. I can't remember where he had come from.
Delaware, because remember the rumor is Tech went after him when we hired Ricky Stokes.
I think the story that eventually got told was that Jim Weaver had a conversation with Mike Bray, and as soon as Mike Bray found out what Jim Weaver was in air quotes offering,
which was like $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that conversation. But apparently he continued to talk to Weaver and gave him some advice. And Tech wound up hiring Ricky Stokes. I don't know what advice Mike Bray gave him. But anyway, I remember that play, and I remember just thinking, wow, I think that guy's a pretty good coach if his team plays like that.
He was the guy who I thought 10 years ago would succeed Coach K. But then Coach K kept coaching longer and longer than I thought he would coach.
Yeah.
And
42 years.
Right. So Mike Bray's window closed because he's a former Coach K assistant. So and I thought he would have been the natural successor, but Coach K just waited too long to retire.
And just like against Clemson, that was an 11-point game at halftime. The teams combined for 94 second-half points. Notre Dame shot 60% in the second half, and the only way Tech won that game, they shot 67%.
It was an extremely entertaining game. Like, if you were a neutral observer, you probably really enjoyed watching that game.
Yeah. So what, Tech had am I remembering the right game? Tech had 42 points in the first half and 45
in the second half.
Yeah. So yes, 87. Right. That's and one thing I meant to do was look up and see. Tech had 87 points. When was the last time they scored that many points this season? Because it's funny, they went through a stretch there. When Tech was winning all those games, they started out scoring something like 87 in Tallahassee.
They scored 85 to 72 in Tallahassee.
Right. So they score 85 in Tallahassee to start the winning streak. And during that winning streak, Tech's scoring gradually declined, but the defense gradually got better and better and better.
Yeah.
And now, finally, they got both elements clicking in the ACC tournament.
Tech is now up to 18th in adjusted offensive efficiency on Ken Pomeroy's website.
Really?
And now they're top 60 in defensive efficiency. And I want to at one point during this stretch, I looked up their stats and I wrote an article about it, and Tech was 110th in defensive efficiency.
Yeah.
I don't know what their lowest spot was of the year, but that's the lowest I remember it being. And within several weeks, they'd gotten up to like 61st.
And we had big time concerns after Chester Frazier left at the end of last year.
Right, to a certain extent. So I think Tech's in-season defensive improvement is the main reason why they went on the run. And maybe that didn't show against Notre Dame in the second half, but it absolutely showed against North Carolina and Duke.
And
that was just the third time at that point that the Hokies had scored 80 or more against an ACC team. 85, you're right, against FSU. 81 against Georgia Tech. Those are the only two times. So, again, and I was just reading through the schedule. You're right. It gradually declined. The scoring kept going down. Syracuse was lower than Georgia Tech. Virginia lower than that. But, again, the defense, very, very good. And that showed against North Carolina. I think we should take a break before we dive into the Blue Bloods. We'll talk about Carolina and Duke and look ahead at March Madness. Virginia Tech's matchup on Friday against Texas, and the women's team Friday against Florida Gulf Coast up in College Park. We'll get to all that in the second half of episode 229 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Stay with us. We'll take a break and be right back. Welcome back to episode 229 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Right now, recapping Virginia Tech's magical run to their first ever ACC championship in men's basketball. We've got Will, we got Chris, and I'm Jake on set. Still nobody in the fourth chair right now. We'll see maybe David Cunningham comes later. I know Mike Young spoke to the media earlier, and he was live tweeting that. We've already talked about the first two games of the tournament, but now the two ones that everybody's really going to remember from the tournament, knocking off the two Blue Bloods in back-to-back nights. Let's start with North Carolina, the 3 seed coming in. And this game, we talked about how the offense led the way against Notre Dame. This was the defense. Carolina, 3 of 25 from beyond the arc, almost exactly what the Hokies did when Carolina came to Blacksburg.
Yeah, I had just watched Carolina play offense against Duke 6 nights earlier.
Yes.
And Duke could not stop them. Duke could not stop the ball. Carolina was making outside shots too. And you're like, this is a Carolina team that seems to be peaking. What they had done to Virginia the day before. But, man, that was an impressive performance. And, Bacot is such an awesome player. 19 points, 15 rebounds. But, offensively, and I know he was, 9 of 10 from the field?
Yes.
Most of those points, though, most of those made shots came off offensive rebounds and junk baskets. It wasn't very often where Carolina was actually able to get the ball into the post in one of their offensive sets and then run their offense through him.
It was really fascinating to watch Tech's defense on Bacot. There were a number of instances where he caught the ball on the baseline or maybe a fair distance away from the basket, and the double came from the baseline, and he was just stuck and didn't really know what to do with the ball. I don't watch Carolina basketball closely, but in the context of that game, he did not pass out of the double team very well at all. And Tech's defense on him was brilliant. And he talked about it after the game. I don't remember what he said, but he talked in detail about how Tech defended him and how hard it was for him.
Historically, North Carolina has always been better in the paint than outside the three-point line, is the way I viewed it. I remember when Tech beat them in the Dean Dome back in 2007. And Virginia Tech, for part of that game, switched to his own, and UNC couldn't make any shots. And that's basically the reason why Tech won, is when UNC started missing some outside jumpers and things like that.
Yeah, Caleb Love is a guy I fear because he makes contested.
He does, but other than him, Leaky Black is a guy, technically speaking, is a 40% three-point shooter, but the reason he's a 40% three-point shooter is because nobody guards him because he can't score.
Yeah.
But yet he's one of their 5 starters and plays a lot. So they don't have 5 offensive threats on the court at the same time like Virginia Tech does.
Yeah.
And Caleb Love, he had one of his worst games of the season. I want to say he went 3 of 16 from the floor.
Sounds about right. And I think that you said 3 of 25. I think the team actually went 3 of 26.
3 of 26. They might have missed one at the end there that I wasn't thinking about. Yeah. And if you take away, we mentioned Bacot went 9 of 10 from the floor. If you take that out, I think North Carolina as a team shot less than 25% from the floor for the game. So just great defensive performance from the Hokies and kind of gets a monkey off their back. North Carolina ended their ACC tournament hopes each of the last 2 seasons, finally got past them into the championship game for the first time ever.
Not to mention the Tyler Hansbrough shot. There were a number of monkeys on Virginia Tech's back that were UNC related.
There was no drama in this one, though.
No
drama at all.
I think if you had told Tech fans that Ben Varga and Camden Johnson and Lynn Kidd would check in against North Carolina, they would have said it would have gone the other way.
I meant to write that in my article yesterday. I was like, my God, in the semifinals and the finals against North Carolina and Duke, the Hokies were beating both teams so badly that we were putting our walk-ons.
Play walk-ons, yeah.
Who would have ever thought it?
And so, again, going back to looking at the bracket at the beginning of the tournament, NC State and Clemson, get past that one. I like the matchup with Notre Dame, and I think the thinking before the tournament was, I hope UVA beats Carolina, because I like the matchup between Tech and UVA better than Tech and Carolina.
You like the matchup better, but you wanted another chance at a top 50 win.
No excuse.
You wanted another. You didn't know Tech was going to win the ACC tournament, so you wanted another chance at a top 50 win.
Do you remember where Carolina was in the net?
Oh, 33rd.
Okay,
they were absolutely
easily a Q1.
Easily.
Yeah.
So that's from a Q1 win perspective. That's the matchup you wanted.
Yeah.
From a probability win standpoint, probably UVA, but in hindsight, that's not true. I mean, Virginia Tech played Carolina very well in both meetings. Carolina's a tough team to beat at home, so they won that matchup. Tech completely outplayed Carolina in the second meeting. They just missed their shots.
Now here's the thing that that is kind of hidden and forgotten about the ACC tournament game against Carolina. Excuse me. Tech missed 11 shots in a row at one point.
Yes.
Usually that's the kiss of death.
And Carolina didn't come back and take the lead during that stretch.
No, Tech was leading 10-7 when they started that. And when Aluma finally hit one, at that point it was, I think, tied at 14, and that put Tech up 16-14.
There was about a 10-minute stretch of that game where neither team could score whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then Tech got it going, UNC not so much.
What if Caleb Love hits 2 or 3 3-pointers while Virginia Tech's missing 11 in a row? You know, and that's the kind of thing that's happened to Tech, but it didn't happen in that game.
And Darius Maddox, another great game. I think that's when you kind of realized he's going to be on the all-tournament team. He had 20 points to lead all scorers.
Yeah.
Continuing to show that he can be an elite scorer at this level.
And he's starting to do some other things besides make three-pointers. Obviously, he made three-pointers against UNC, but he also had a couple of cuts to the basket where they hit him on his cuts towards the basket and scored, with lay-ins. And he got to the free throw line a couple of times. And we'll talk about Duke later, but against Duke, his jump shot was not falling. So what did he do? Grabbed 5 rebounds, scrapped on the offensive glass, and had some putbacks and things like that. So his game's getting a little more well-rounded. He's going to be a really, really good player. Well, he's a good player now, but as his game continues to improve across the board, he's going to be really good.
Yeah, offensively, he's really hard to guard because we talked about he gets up so quickly on any shot he takes, but on the three, that's difficult to guard. He's got a nice mid-range game. You're right. If he starts, he'll go to the basket better and better and better as he gets older. And the other thing that'll happen with him is his defense will get better. It's already gotten a lot better this year, but you can see it needs to improve. He's got a chance to just, I don't want to use the word elite, but he can be a really good player.
Sure.
And we're going to give a lot of props to some guys, but Keve Aluma, it seems like in at least 3 of the 4 games, he was overshadowed by somebody. Whether that was Storm Murphy or Darius Maddox against Clemson, Darius Maddox against Carolina, Hunter Couture against Duke. But he averaged, I want to say, close to 20 points.
What was the stat, Will?
He had between 18 and 20 points all 4 games, really. And he did not score in the first 16 minutes of the Duke game.
And then he scored like 11.
Excuse me, first 14 minutes of the Duke game.
And then he scored something, like 9 or
11 points in the last 6 minutes of the first half against Duke.
And
we're not talking about Duke yet.
Not yet. And in that Carolina game especially, I just remember he had Baycott on him the whole game, and that little spin hook shot was going down almost every single time. And he's getting fouled on a good amount of them too.
His repertoire of post moves is extremely impressive in an era where big men are so focused on shooting three-pointers that you don't see quite so many of those old 80s and 90s traditional post moves anymore in basketball. But he's got them all. If he was a little bit more athletic, he'd be an NBA player. If he was just a little bit more.
I think he needs another year in college.
I think another year of development.
Justin Mutz, too. He needs another year, too.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I remember at one point, it might have been for a Q&A, or it might have been on this podcast, we got the question, this was after last season, if you could pick one big man for Virginia Tech, would it be Kerry Blackshear or would it be Keve Aluma? And at the time, I thought it was really, really close, but I went with Aluma because Blackshear got in foul trouble so often. Yep. And I thought that was the only discernible difference between both of those players. And after this year, obviously, I still go with Aluma, but I think Aluma's developed even more this year. And I thought Kerry Blackshear was a really, really good player, but I think Aluma's on a slightly upper level.
Yeah.
And Aluma really helped lead the way in that Carolina win, got the Hokies to their first ever ACC championship game, had to face the top-seeded Duke Blue Devils. Let's talk about that one. We've kind of nibbled at this game a little bit with some of the stuff we've talked about, but really the story we haven't touched on is Hunter Couture. 31 points, a career high. He hit his first 6 3-pointers. I don't think when every player in the country is as hot as they can possibly be, Hunter Couture may be the hottest shooter in the entire country.
Yeah, for a while there, I'm like, oh man, his Florida State record is in jeopardy. He might break his own record here, and maybe he could have if he'd kept shooting and been a little more undisciplined. Yes. But ultimately, what a performance! Now and that's a nationally televised game in the ACC finals that everybody's watching, and there was like no competition on television for that game as far as other conference tournaments, except for maybe like the Pac-12 tournament, which not that many people on the East Coast are watching, quite frankly. Right. So everybody who's a college basketball fan knows who Hunter Couture is now, because he did that on just about the highest stage that you could do.
So a couple things about that. Duke came out and, man, they hit their shots. They scored 15 points in the first 5.5 minutes.
Both teams were hitting their shots. I want to say it was 14,
I know both teams started 5 of 6. I don't know what the overall.
I want to say it might have been 14-12 Tech with
at the first media timeout.
At the first media timeout,
and then,
15 and a half.
And then at the under 12 timeout, Tech still had 14 points. They didn't score at all in that section, in that second phase.
But so Duke came out, and I did the math on it. They were scoring at a 109-point clip early on in about the first 5.5 minutes. Yep. And that's tremendously skilled elite players coming out and punching you in the face and hoping you'll fold. And so everybody talks about Hunter Couture making all those threes. That early 5 to 6 minute stretch where Tech held their ground, I think Couture only made 1 3.
I think you're right.
Storm had 5 points, right?
Storm had the 3 in the corner, and he also had when he cut around and made the jumper from around the free throw line.
And I think he had Tech's first 5 points, right?
No, Aline scored the first shot.
Aline hit the first 3. Yes.
So it was everybody by committee except Aluma and Mutz.
Right.
As we talked about earlier, Aluma was AWOL offensively and then caught fire with about 6 minutes to go in the first half.
Now, to be fair, I was looking at those guys' box scores during the game in the first half, because they weren't scoring a lot.
Right.
But at one point I looked at them, and they both had 4 assists, even though they weren't scoring.
Yeah, I'm not indicating they weren't playing well, but you're right.
But you know, the ball was going through them, and they were getting assists.
So they each had 4 assists in the first half?
At one point during the first half, I looked at the box score, and they both had 4 assists.
That's pretty remarkable.
I don't remember how many points they had at the time or anything like that.
Keve Aluma finished with 7 assists, and it was funny. I was standing in the back of the press conference post-game, and Mike Young goes, Keve Aluma, he didn't have 7 assists in his first 2 years in college.
I watched that,
and I thought that was funny.
He also didn't make any 3-pointers in his first 2 years at Wofford, and this is my perfect example of why player development is incredibly important. Like, Wofford was his only offer. Storm Murphy was a 0-star recruit who wasn't even listed, I believe, on the 247 database with a Wofford offer, even though he did sign with Wofford. And like, Naheem Aline was like number 500 in the country, and he's like the most highly touted of these starters for Virginia Tech.
And the most notable assist is now up on the screen if you want to get a shot of that. For those watching on YouTube, we will talk about that in a second. But quickly, we mentioned the press conference. I thought it was really cool just looking up there. 3 years ago, the 4 guys who were sitting at the press conference were all either at or committed to Wofford College. The 4 guys after the Hokies won the ACC championship, Mike Young, Storm Murphy, Keve Aluma, and Hunter Couture up on the podium. Just shows you, again, player development is more important than
scouting for your system.
Yes.
Scouting for your system is huge. And no, don't get Mike Young said at the beginning of his tenure that Hunter Couture could play for anybody in the country. And I actually come on in, David. Good morning,
David Cunningham, ladies and gentlemen.
Fashionably late. But, Mike Young is right about Hunter Couture. Like, his defense translates anywhere. His defense is really, really good, and his shooting translates anywhere. But, not for whatever reason, not many people thought that coming out of high school. He's got more confetti.
All right, come here.
Throw it up here. We could always have more confetti.
All right, so David's putting confetti on the table. There you go.
David got more confetti than I did.
So you're talking about Hunter Couture?
Yeah, I'm talking about Hunter Couture, and basically a whole team full of mid-level to low-level recruits is how they were viewed coming out of high school.
Yes.
And this is why I believe that college basketball is a superior product to college football. College football is just all about being bigger, faster, and stronger, and physical brutality. And at this point, because everybody knows who the top players are, because we have the internet these days. They didn't have the internet back in the 90s. It was all you had to go out and see players with your own eyes and things like that. And it's not like that these days. Everybody who knows who the best players are, and they're all going to the same schools. So just because it's a physicality-based sport, if you're one of those 4 or 5 schools that can get those players, you're going to win the national. Yep. It's going to be those same teams every year, and everybody else is going to be fighting for second-level status in college football. That's just the way it is because of how football is.
Yeah.
It's not the case in basketball. You know, you put a team full of experienced players in the right system together in basketball, and you can win a lot of games.
So go back and watch those UNC games, the UNC and Duke games, and late in the UNC game, look at the look on Armando Bacot's face. Late in the Duke game, look at the look on Paolo Banchero's face.
Right.
Alabama football players never wear that look in a game because they're physically dominating.
They're just physically better than
play.
everybody. Yeah.
But it's just there were a number of times where Storm Murphy was being guarded by Mark Williams. Is that his first name?
Mark Williams,
yeah.
yes.
ACC Defensive Player of the Year. You know, Mark Williams, he's like 7 feet tall. He's got a 7 foot 8 inch wingspan, and Storm Murphy's going up against him. If you have a mismatch like that in football, you lose by 6 or 7 touchdowns.
Yeah.
You know, and
just
to your point.
Yeah, I know. And so, like, for me, football now these days is more about the experience, going tailgate and everything like that. Don't get me wrong, I think Tech can be better than they have been in football.
Yeah.
But, like, national championships are out the door. You know, that dream ended. I think Virginia Tech can have a higher ceiling basketball program than football program just because of how the sport of basketball is compared to football.
And you're right. You look at the front court for Duke. Mark Williams, 7'1", 240, if I'm remembering correctly. Paolo Banchero, 6'10", 250.
Yep. Now that block Williams had on Keve was that's kind of front and center of why he was ACC Defensive Player of the Year. That was extremely
He
impressive.
Almost just plucked the ball out of the air with his hand.
It was insane. But he got in foul trouble.
He did. He got 4 fouls. Let's talk about the moment. We've got it up on the screen now. The dunk, Justin Muntz. It felt like, you know, in the stadium, it felt like Virginia Tech fans were cautiously optimistic, but the thought was, it's Duke. They're going to make a run. It felt like that moment was where Tech fans started to realize, this one's in the bag.
Tech had a 10-point lead, and Keve, I believe, caught the ball in the block and was backing down the baseline. He cut underneath the bucket, and I think he was even being double teamed.
It was a very impressive cut to the basket by Mutz, because most guys in that situation, they just watch Aluma try to go up and score.
That was the first thing out of Billis's mouth in the middle of the play was nice cut.
Right.
And so that dunk came with 2.5 minutes left to go. It put Tech up by 12. And Chris, you were at Champs. I was at a buddy's house. There were about 8 of us, and we lost our minds right at that moment.
Absolutely.
That's when you knew.
No doubt. That's about the time when everybody started getting their phones out because they were about to start filming the celebration. The post-game celebration. Yeah. So it was over right there, no question. Like Coach K called a timeout at that point, and everybody looks around at each other, and everybody's just come to the realization that we're going to win the ACC.
Yeah, and he posterized Banchero, and we'll see about making that into a poster. It's our photo.
Yeah.
Liam Smith
taken by
logo.
Liam Smith.
Yep. Maybe we can get Mutz to sign it.
And we're super busy right now, but I really want to start doing the research on getting that thing printed up and sold.
Yeah, because that's going to be an iconic photo in Virginia Tech basketball history. And there's another one I've seen on social media, and I'm not sure who took it. I don't know if it's a Hokie Sports photo or not. It's Mutz with an ACC championship hat, and there's just a wall of orange and maroon confetti behind him. It almost looks like a waterfall behind him, and he's just there by himself, isolated in the shot. I wish we had that one too, but oh well.
Wish we owned that one.
That's definitely going to be a moment we remember for a while. And Will Stewart, if anybody was watching during the break and saw the sky cam up there, Will showed everybody that's his phone background now.
Right. So here you go, Malcolm. Yeah, so I've got that as phone wallpaper, and I put that on the TSL Twitter feed if you want to come.
Yeah, so we've got 2 versions. We've got the landscape, which I guess you saw up there, but we've also got the lock screen version, portrait mode.
And David was there as well. David has finally arrived back after his 2-day weekend turned into 1 day. Did not sleep overnight, so obviously understandable. A little tired this morning, but you could feel it after that dunk. Hokies fans got the "Let's Go Hokies" chants going. I believe Enter Sandman played shortly after there. It started to feel like Hokies were taking it home.
First of all, I have showered. I have slept. Good. I did not. Chris Hirons, who wrote some fantastic pieces for Tech Sideline, and Sam Owls, who was doing stuff for 3304. We both rode together. We left. We dropped Liam Smith, our photographer, off at the airport at about 6 a.m. yesterday, And then
Sunday, yeah.
I picked him up, and we left Brooklyn about 7. Got back around 3:30ish. And then it was busy because the selection show for both the men and then the women.
Yeah.
And then I finally got a chance to sleep last night. So Will called me this morning and woke me up.
At 10:28.
But I did get good. I did get good sleep, and I didn't even realize there was a press conference with Mike Young this morning. That
I didn't know that was happening.
Brian sent out a thing about it. Brian Cox sent out a thing about it last night. So
But you were already asleep at that point.
I hopped on there and got to talk to Mike.
Yeah,
Nice.
So
What was it? Was that about the matchup with Texas?
Just Texas, yeah, and also talking about the ACC championship game. I tweeted a couple notable things. Let's see. Mike said it's very fitting for Storm Murphy to play in Wisconsin one final time, considering
certainly
that
true.
it was a leap of faith. He said it was a leap of faith for that kid to come to South Carolina, for him to go to that great tournament in Milwaukee in front of his family and friends. It'll be special for him.
I think I read it's about 2 hours from where he grew up.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, it's pretty evident that if we hadn't beaten Duke, we wouldn't have gone in. I scratched my head, but we're in.
And I wrote that down. I wanted to talk about that, actually. And let's jump into that. The bracket announced yesterday, 6 p.m. On CBS. Hokies come in as an 11 seed. They released the official seed list. The Hokies were 46, even after beating Duke. It feels like if Tech had lost that game, they were not going to be playing in the NCAA tournament.
And I think it's clear at this point to me that the main thing the selection committee values is quality wins. And like even with Virginia Tech's run through the ACC tournament, you look at a team like Rutgers that played in the Big Ten, where it seems like you play a quad one game every other game.
Yeah,
Rutgers had like twice as many quad one wins as Virginia Tech, and Notre Dame finished second in the ACC. They're in a play-in game. All right, can you imagine how you would feel if Virginia Tech finished second in the ACC and you were in a play? Everybody would be like, "Oh, they're out to get Virginia Tech. They hate Virginia Tech." Blah blah blah. No, they're not.
Because I can tell you're going to remember that particular nugget for a long time.
Absolutely, and because Notre Dame is, I'm not going to say they're basketball royalty, but they're a big name. They have an excellent coach, and they finished second in the ACC, and they barely got into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
It's all about the number of quality wins you get, and probably your strength of schedule to a certain extent as well. But the ACC lagged behind the other leagues in quality wins because the ACC wasn't a quality conference, at least in the terms of the metrics that are used. And the Big Ten teams, I bet there were teams in the bottom half of the Big Ten standings that had more quad one wins than Virginia Tech, because you're playing a quad one team almost every night in that league. So that was the ACC's issue this year, and that's why Virginia Tech almost didn't make it in. Even if you look up and down, I was looking at the net rankings this morning, and they've got all the resumes to the teams out to the right. Virginia Tech's the highest ranked Power 5 net team with fewer than 4 quad one wins.
Wow.
Highest ranked Power 5 net team with fewer than 4 quad one wins.
Right.
Tech wound up eventually with 3.
Right. And so I think that's a bigger factor than anything else. You win a certain number of games. Generally 18 is the magic number if you have enough quadrant 1 quality wins. This year Michigan got in at
17 and 14
for the first time since 2006 a 17 win team has got in as at large, and they had 5 or 6 quad 1 wins, and they had the number 3 strength of schedule in the country.
And they were not even in the last 4.
Right. So that shows you how much the committee values quality wins
and strength of schedule, which kind of go together.
Right. And so they want to put 64, 68 teams, whatever, in the NCAA tournament, and they want those teams to show they could beat other quality teams. Because to them, that's how you get the most high-quality games in the NCAA tournament, is by putting together a bunch of teams that have beaten each other all year long. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I honestly don't. I think it would have been a shame if Virginia Tech hadn't made it, but I mean, I've talked all year that I think the key was quality wins, and Virginia Tech didn't have them until the end. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we've seen them beat 4 straight NCAA tournament teams: Miami, Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Duke. I'm actually feel a little bit fortunate that Tech's an 11th seed, because I thought going in they were going to be a 10. And I thought Maybe if we're really unlucky, the stupid committee will put us as a 9 seed.
Yeah.
And it depends on your view of what's better. Like if your goal was to win one game, I guess theoretically speaking, the 8-9 game is the game to be in because that's an evenly matched game. But if your goal was to make a run, you don't want anywhere near that 8-9 game. Yeah, I mean, I think 11 is an ideal seed for Virginia Tech. They're going to play a Texas team that, if you look at it statistically, it's very evenly matched. Virginia Tech has an odd resume in that one half of their resume suggests they are an 11 seed in terms of strength of schedule, in terms of quality win, things like that. Virginia Tech is as bubblicious as it gets from those standpoints. But the actual efficiency ratings and the computer rankings suggest that Tech is about a number 6 seed themselves, which is why in a lot of ways you can look at this Virginia Tech-Texas matchup as, I think, one of the best games, one of the best matchups of the first round of the NCAA tournament.
In terms of being a pure matchup.
Yes. Just in terms of efficiency ratings and computer rankings, it looks like a pick 'em.
There's an outside shot. Tech could be favored in this game.
Oh, I think they will. Texas has a player that's like, he's out for personal leave over the last 6 or 7 games or something like that.
Yeah.
Right, and Texas has had a losing record in the Big 12.
Texas lost 3 straight games to end the season
without him.
Yeah, and 4 of the last 5.
They had a losing record without this guy, and then they had a winning record in the Big 12 with him. So and they got a 6 seed. They got a 6 seed based on their overall resume throughout the entire season, but now they don't have this guy. And he was a big part. So honestly, Texas without this guy is probably more like an 8 or 9 seed. And if you look at Virginia Tech from an efficiency rating standpoint and the fact that they're peaking right now, Tech is probably more like a 5 or a 6 seed.
Yeah. So let me jump in here and say the other thing, and this goes with what you were just saying about Texas, is that one of the metrics in the old days used to be last 10. How'd you do in your last 10 games?
They eventually changed that to last 12, by the way.
Yeah, which as the schedules got bigger, that made sense. So Virginia Tech, one of the hottest teams in the country. Texas A&M, before they lost the SEC championship, they were one of the hottest teams in the country, and they were like 68th on the committee's list. Mm-hmm. Texas is clearly not playing well lately, and none of that mattered.
Right.
Two of the hottest teams in the country, Virginia Tech and Texas A&M, were not going to make it in without winning their conference tournament.
Yeah, and because there used to be complaints that teams who maybe didn't have an overall good resume would get hot at the end of the year, and the NCAA selection committee would put them into the tournament with a team who maybe had a better overall resume. And the argument there is, listen, what's the point of even playing? Who cares how you do in December and November if you're not gonna? If that doesn't matter in March, So I think, again, I actually think it's fair. I think you have to look at the overall season.
Yeah.
And I want to look at that Texas matchup. Looking at the video of Texas being selected yesterday, I thought that was one of the funniest things to come out of.
I did not see that.
I thought the picture of the Texas guy. There's a picture of somebody. Well, you said
I tweeted it out.
Yeah, he's got Virginia Tech and Texas on the screen, and there's this Texas player who's like just looking at the camera. He's got these big eyes and everything.
Well, just watching his face, it's like you see Texas pop up as a 6 seed, and he's cheering and celebrating, and then Virginia Tech pops up on the screen.
So I put that on the Tech Sideline Twitter feed and said caption the pick. So it was already getting funny.
I'd have to do the research on this, and I'm not going to do it, but Virginia Tech might be like the best 11 seed ever. They won the ACC tournament championship, which, yes, it's a down year in the ACC, but they've won 13 of their last 15 games, and it's not like they backed their way into tournament champions. I mean, they smoked Duke, and they smoked UNC.
Yeah.
And they controlled the game against Notre Dame, and that's 3 NCAA tournament teams. So I can't imagine any other 11 seed has ever come into the NCAA tournament like bombing teams like North Carolina and Duke in back-to-back games and being top 25 in some of the efficiency ratings. I mean, Tech, I believe, is now in the top 20 of the BPI. I want to say they're up to 23rd in Ken Palm.
21 in Ken Palm.
21 in Ken
and they're
Palm.
20 in the BPI. Okay. And I think they're around 28 in
27th in the net.
Yeah.
Probably. So you're talking about a borderline top 25 team here in Virginia Tech in terms of quality.
That's an 11 seed.
That's an 11 seed.
Because they started their season off.
Right, because they started off their season. I think it's great because Tech is more like a 6 seed, and without that key player, Texas is more like an 11 seed to me.
and you get through this first game, you might as well be a 6 seed at that point. You're playing the same schedule the rest of the way.
Exactly.
It's going to be fun to watch this week, especially what that line does when it comes out, whether Tech is favored. It was funny, again, in that same video, one of the other Texas players, you can hear him go, it's a good matchup.
He's right. Well, Texas is really good defensively, by the way. Texas is a top 20.
So if you're watching on YouTube, we now have the picture of the Texas player who doesn't look thrilled to be playing Virginia Tech. I know it's just a moment in time, but it's still funny to look at.
It's still funny because you see your name as a 6 seed if you're Texas, and you're like, oh sweet, we get to play an 11 seed, and then the 11 seed's the freaking ACC
champion.
That'd just beat Duke and North Carolina.
And North Carolina, yeah.
Well, Andy Bitter tweeted yesterday the line opened last night at about Texas 1.5.
Really? Okay. I think that's going to change.
That might get bet down to a pick 'em.
I think
Tech was favored over Notre Dame. Notre Dame was the number 2 seed,
and Tech was favored.
And Tech was the 7 seed, and Tech was favored in that game. And if you look at the numbers, Texas is right around where Texas is a little bit higher than Tech and Ken Palm, but so much of that ranking was built into when they had their key player. They're an elite defensive team.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is going to be a great basketball match.
I agree.
Like, it's going to be one of the best offenses in the country versus one of the best defenses in the country.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the most intriguing matchups of the first round, I think.
So apparently, let's dig into Texas a little bit. I'm guessing that's your next question. And I think David's done some research.
David.
They turn other teams over a lot, right, David?
Yeah, so Texas is... So to get Virginia Tech's metrics out there, just adjusted efficiency, offensive and defensive. Tech ranks 18th offensively and 55th defensively. And as Chris has talked about many times, that defensive rating has jumped up so many times.
Better than the 55, it looks like. Because, I mean, it was just a few weeks ago, Tech was 110th.
Texas is 32nd offensively and 13th defensively.
Right.
So kind of like the Virginia Tech, but flipped, offensive and defensive. Texas really turns people over, 14th in the country in terms of turning people over.
Forcing turnovers.
And in non-steal turnovers, that's 18th in the country. Right. But offensively, they're not a fantastic offensive shooting team. They don't shoot the 3-ball well. They shoot at 32%. So... it's not like it's kind of like they.
You hush, David Cunningham.
It's not like
they're going to shoot 12 of 15 now.
Well, it's like they not that they struggle to score, but it's not like they also don't have like a go-to scorer that drops 15 points. They've got a couple guys. They got 3 guys that score in double figures. So it's kind of like a well-balanced team, I would say, where they're not gonna, it's not like they're gonna shoot 100 3-pointers. They're going to kind of balance it a little bit outside game, a little bit inside game. And I think the way Virginia Tech's defense has played, I mean, I think that was a point that was kind of just overlooked, like, just down the stretch. I mean, Tech won, 13 of 15 to end the regular season?
It was because they played
and it was
better
because
defense.
of the defense. There were games at Georgia Tech, at Miami, where the offense was not good. Tech couldn't hit 3-pointers. And the defense was still as good as it had been earlier and later. And then on Saturday night, when Tech's defense is good and then the offense decides to pick up the slack, that's what you get.
Against UNC and Duke, you just got a feel of how good this team can be when the offense and defense are both clicking. And the thing is, Tech only played good defense for 1/2 against Duke, I would say. Mike Young told him at halftime, look, we're not playing good enough defense. Y'all aren't going to be able to outscore this team. We got to play better defense in the second half, and they did. Now, he might have been wrong because they still might have been able to outscore Duke. I mean, Tech was just on that night.
So Duke had, 39 points in the first half? I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they finished with
67.
Right.
And that was
one of those was a meaningless 3 at the end.
Yes. Yeah, from Coach
Duke,
K's grandson.
I believe Duke.
Is that who that was?
Yes.
I tweeted this after the game. Duke was in Duke's last, I think it was from the 12-minute mark on. Duke missed. Duke was 4 of 15, and one of those was Michael Savarino's 3 at the buzzer. Correct. So Duke was essentially 3 of 14 in the last 12 minutes of the basketball game.
Wow! And they looked really shell-shocked.
And that wasn't just Duke chucking up bad shots. That was Virginia Tech playing good defense.
Right.
And this feels like Virginia Tech's going to be that popular team to make a little bit of a run in these brackets. I'm going to be interested to see when more brackets are made and those percentages are available.
Yeah. I want to see what that line does. It wouldn't shock me if it went down to like a pick 'em or something because I'm going to pick Virginia Tech to win the game, and I don't know if it's because I'm biased or not, but I just think if I was looking at it, if it was some other random team playing Texas, and I researched it and I said, 13 out of 15, they just crushed Duke and Carolina, and one of Texas's key guys is out indefinitely, and he's one of the reasons they're a 6th seed. If they hadn't had him all season, they're not a 6th seed. So it just seems to point towards Virginia Tech winning the basketball game.
And if they're able to win that one, almost certainly they would get Purdue in the round of 32. And this Purdue team at one point was the number 1 ranked team in the country.
Yeah.
They've got Jaden Ivey, who is probably going to be a top 5 pick in this upcoming NBA draft. And I want to say Zach Edey in the paint is 7'3", correct? He's a big guy. Yeah. He is a big 7-footer. If the Hokies are going to make a run, it seems like they're going to have to go through one of the better teams in the entire.
Yeah, he's 7'4".
7'4".
Oh,
even
shortchanged him.
7'4", 295.
Yeah, but how long are his arms?
Probably
sure he's got really short arms.
Probably longer than many. And this is a Purdue team, or real quick, that was really good all season. Kind of had a loss, kind of sprinkled in every 6 games. Mm-hmm. They had a stretch where they won 6 games and then lost to Michigan. And then it was one of Michigan's quality wins. That's why Michigan got in the tournament. Mm-hmm. They lost to Iowa on Sunday in the Big Ten championship game. So, this is a team that's really good. They are number 3 in adjusted offensive efficiency. Wow. They are a very good offensive team. Defensively, they're 100. So not where Texas and Virginia Tech are more balanced one way or the other. This is a much better offensive team than defensive.
I remember when Tech played them in Buzz's last year,
2019, in Charleston.
Yeah, and Tech beat them 87-82, and they had Carson Edwards.
That was a great
game. That was a great game.
So let me jump in and say you're talking Purdue and Virginia Tech in 2018?
2018-19.
It was 2018-19.
Look up the highlights on YouTube.
Oh, I think Tech had 3 guys with 20-plus points that night.
Yeah, and Edwards went off. That was a fun game.
Yeah.
That was kind of the game where you felt like that team was legit.
But they were an Elite 8 team that year.
Yes.
You remember their game with UVA in the NCAA tournament was a classic.
They probably should have won that.
They probably should have won that.
It was 89-83. Mm-hmm. Nikhil Alexander-Walker had 25, and Justin Robinson and Ahmed Hill each had 23.
Each had 20.
And Kerry Blackshear had 13.
Right.
And Tech was 10 of 24 from behind the arc. And the one moment that always sticks in my head is Tech gets a steal, Justin Robinson throws off the backboard to Ahmed Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a high-level basketball game.
Yeah.
You had Carson Edwards on one side, and you had 2 future NBA players, and Justin Robinson and Nikhil Alexander-Walker on the other side. Really entertaining game to watch. And that was Virginia Tech, a Sweet 16 team, beating Purdue, who was an Elite 8 team. Yeah. I mean, it was a great basketball game. I think Purdue is one of those teams that, if they get hot, they've played such a good schedule all year in the Big Ten. They're used to facing quality competition. I don't know what the later stages of the bracket looks like, but, if they get by their second-round opponent, either Texas or Virginia Tech, then you have to talk about them as a potential national champion. All that said, go Yale.
Go Yale. Yes, go Bulldogs. So, again, those would be the 2 games that would happen this weekend. On Friday, 4:30 p.m.
Eastern. 4:30 p.m. East.
Yes, we got people all over the country. 4:30 Eastern, Virginia Tech will face Texas.
And the game itself, I think, is in the Central Time
Yeah,
zone.
it is.
Yes.
So it'll be 3:30 Central. And I don't know if you guys saw, but the women play Florida Gulf Coast. It'll be 2:30 Eastern.
Yes.
So it'll be the women's game 2:30 Eastern on ESPNU,
back to back,
and then the men's game right after 4:30 on TBS.
And poor Jake Lyman has been drafted to call the Virginia Tech baseball game on the radio on Friday,
at
which
4
happens
p.m.
to be during the middle of the Virginia Tech men's basketball NCAA.
So I will miss the second half of the women's game most likely, and the entirety of the men's game. So
maybe, what's the forecast? Maybe it'll rain on Friday.
If Virginia Tech wins that game, I feel like I'm obligated to not watch the next one too.
No, you can't.
30, Jake. You got Jake. You got some rain. 70% chance Wednesday, 50 on Thursday, and 30 on Friday.
32% chance on Friday.
So,
probably
well,
not.
if it rains, maybe I'll get to watch it.
The thing is, you can't even manufacture a rain out for Virginia Tech. It's not. It can't be
it's turf.
It's turf.
It's
so
turf.
You can't pull out a Bull Durham moment where Crash Davis goes out there and says, "I can get us a rain out," and he just sets the sprinklers off all night. You can't do that.
It would have to be actively raining pretty hard for that game to get canceled. So I assume I won't be able to watch it.
Mostly cloudy with some showers in the afternoon, so at least the rain's predicted for the afternoon.
Well, so we'll see what happens there. Maybe I'll get to watch it, maybe not. But Hokies in Texas again, 4:30 Eastern in Milwaukee in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and then Purdue or Yale. That game would be on Sunday if the Hokies were to advance that game to go to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, that I was going to say that Purdue Yale game. That is at 2 p.m. on TBS. So right before the Hokies. So right
flip back and forth between the women's game.
I know where I'm spending my afternoon.
I'm definitely going to be at Champs telling them what TVs, what put on what TVs.
We need one on Purdue Yale, one on the women's game, and
one
then get ready for the Tech game.
Yeah, and just a quick thing on this Yale team. Nothing crazy impressive except tempo-wise. Yale is, in terms of tempo, average possession length defensively, which is really interesting to think about. They're ranked 9th in the country.
Wow, so they really make opposing teams work to get good shots.
The next team in the NCAA tournament that is up there in average possession length defensively is Auburn. Mm-hmm. And Auburn is 9 spots lower. So this Yale team really kind of makes teams press offensively, which is just something to think about. Yale's defensive numbers are good, offensively not so much. And they play at they're 86th in tempo. So,
maybe
their matchup
offense on defense.
Their matchup against Purdue is, I'm really intrigued to see, because Purdue, like we said, is such a good basketball team. Really intrigued to see the way Purdue approaches that game.
And Yale just squeaked by the top seed in the Ivy League, Princeton. Yesterday to take that one home. We've talked a lot about the men. Let's talk a little bit about the women's team. 5 seed in the Spokane region of the bracket. They will get Florida Gulf Coast in College Park, Maryland on Friday. Again, 2:30 p.m. tip for that one. And then they will face most likely Maryland, the 4 seed, who's hosting on Sunday.
Yeah, they host Delaware.
Yes. So a lot of local teams in College Park. Could see some decent crowds there, with Maryland obviously hosting it. Hokies only 5 hours away in Blacksburg, and obviously
a lot of fans.
A lot of fans in Northern Virginia and DC, and then Delaware, just across the Chesapeake Bay from there. So those should be fun. Women's team trying to reach the Sweet 16. That's been their goal all year.
I feel good about them going to the Sweet 16 because I think they're a better team than their 5 seed indicates. And I'm not saying their resume suggests they should be higher than a 5. I'm not saying that, but I do think their quality is actually a little bit better than a 5. I think that's a pretty even matchup. Wish it wasn't on the road, but
yes.
But at the same time, I think they've got a good chance to get through.
And injuries, I think, has to be probably top of mind for that team. Elizabeth Kitley looks like she's going to be okay.
Yeah,
she's going to play.
I talked to both. We got a chance to. Chris Hirons and I were both there, and we got a chance to talk to 4 different players. Kayla King and Elizabeth Kitley were 2 of them, and Kenny Brooks last night. Kayla King's still in a walking boot, but as far as I'm aware, talking with Kenny and the players, they're fine. They'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just precautionary.
I mean, it's so good that there's an extra week.
Yeah, that's what Kayla
2
said.
weeks between.
That it was nice that the ACC tournament's a week earlier, because if the ACC tournament was this past week, they would have a lot less time to rehab.
Right.
Well, again, Friday and Sunday, those are the 2 games for both teams if they're able to advance past the first game. And make sure to tune in tonight at Tech Talk Live. Finale tonight. Evan Hughes is going to host it along with Mike Burnup.
Evan Hughes finally watched the movie Major League.
I know.
and since he finally watched the movie, so many good things have been happening to Virginia Tech sports. He kept texting me every time Tech would win this week. He'd be like, ever since I watched Major League, Tech has made the ACC tournament finals. And then the next day, ever since I watched Major League, Virginia Tech has won the ACC.
And we were just talking about before we went on with me on the baseball broadcast on Friday afternoon. No one's going to be listening with the women's game and the men's game going on.
You can break
I'm gonna have to toe the line there. So
you got to break out your Bob Uecker line,
dude. You should do it, man. So like, if there's a routine,
I don't think you should. Do that
I'm kidding.
line.
No, you got to make sure you have that stream up like next to you.
Oh yeah, it'll be on my laptop. Where I'll have the live stats half the screen, and probably have March Madness live up on the other side.
So are you doing the streaming broadcast, or are you doing just radio?
Just radio. So
you can, like, if there's a routine fly ball to right, you should just say, who's Tech's right fielder?
Right fielder is Nick Biddison.
Nick Biddison scales the wall. He's standing on top of the wall. He catches the ball.
He does a backflip into the bullpen.
You know, it's I don't even. I'm sure you know, but Tech went 14 or 15 innings last night with Georgia Tech.
14 innings,
Tech lost
5
in the
hours and 15
14th
minutes
inning.
in the second game of a doubleheader.
In the second game of doubleheader, yeah. Virginia Tech does not have the pitching depth, in my opinion, to play a doubleheader, much less go to extra innings.
With Georgia Tech.
Right.
Yes, Evan called me last night after about 9 hours on the broadcast, and I could tell he was exhausted.
Dude, I'm telling you, this is the stuff you guys do, it's a young man's game. I just
Long week up in Brooklyn too. Yeah, so again, I will have to find a way to watch that. But it's going to be a big Friday, though, with those back-to-back games. Should be a fun weekend. Again, Evan Hughes will host Tech Talk Live tonight with Mike Burnup, and it'll be first half Kenny Brooks, second half will be Mike Young. So Jack Brizendine will finally have his last Tech Talk Live transcription tonight.
And it'll be a lot more entertaining one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's looking forward to getting a break from that for a while, I'm sure.
So NCAA wrestling championships come up this weekend, right?
Yes.
It's funny. There's not much overlap between wrestling and basketball fan bases because, March Madness takes time. It takes place on the same weekend that the NCAA tournament starts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And wrestling fans are usually just it's like.
Wrestling fans are hardcore about
yes,
wrestling.
They may not be a big group, but all of them are hardcore. They're going to follow it hard. So definitely something to look forward to there. Hokies want to say 5, 6 qualifiers for the NCAA?
I think it's 7 or 8.
7 or 8. Okay. Oh, yes. I remember seeing it was 8.
Yeah, I think Jack said it was 8. And a lot of them are high seeds. Like, there are a lot of guys that are high seeds.
Yeah, Corbin Myers, Mekhi Lewis.
Nathan Traxler.
Yeah.
Hunter Bolin, he lost in the
Sam Latona,
ACCs,
Bryce Andonian.
Yes.
There are a lot of guys.
So a big weekend ahead. Softball also in town this weekend. They've got North Carolina.
They just swept Syracuse.
And all right, so let's
let's
go over what's going to happen this weekend. All right, so Virginia Tech's going to play in 2 NCAA tournament games on Friday.
Right.
Baseball's in town this
ACC
weekend.
Home opener against Pitt this weekend.
Syracuse is in town this weekend. There's an open spring football practice, I believe, at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. It's noon. It's noon. Because I was so afraid that Virginia Tech was going to end up playing an NCAA tournament game at noon.
Yes,
like
last
Saturday.
Year.
Right. We got an open football practice, but it's during the middle of the NCAA basketball game.
You would have hoped they would have moved it at that point.
You would have hoped, but at any rate, so you can be in town. Gosh, I'd say come into town on Friday, watch the Tech NCAA tournament game at a bar. You'll have a great time in Blacksburg.
Watch both Tech NCAA
exactly.
tournament.
And you can go to softball, baseball over the weekend.
And then Saturday you can watch the open football practice at noon, and then go to softball and baseball right after that if you want to.
Lacrosse also plays
and watch wrestlings.
Right. So you can. You can have a complete Virginia Tech sports weekend this weekend. You don't have to wait for the spring game.
Yes, no shortage of Virginia Tech athletics this weekend. Before we check on the YouTube chat, I want to quickly bring up, I mentioned Mike Burnup. Did you guys listen to the radio call of the Darius Maddox buzzer beater?
Oh my god!
No, I'm not.
No,
dude, we were so. This is something us the 10-12 VTSMA kids that were up all week. We were joking about it all week because it was funny, but it was also classic Mike Burnup.
It was one of our favorite moments.
We'll have to look out for it. See, Maddox is in the SMA program.
Yes,
he is.
Okay, so y'all should give him a project. He should do play-by-play of his own three-pointer.
That would
be awesome.
You got to tell Bill. You know what's
review.
interesting? I don't think they ever ran it, but Jake and I and all the other guys that were up there, because there were, I believe, 10 or 9 current VTSMA students, and then Liam Smet and I. And of course, there were a couple other CT people that are there that aren't VTSMA. But ESPN, after, I guess it was for the Notre Dame game, after Maddox hit the buzzer, ESPN, and Andrea Carter was doing the sideline, and she talked with Brian Cox, and they were going to do a feature on Darius, but also lead into the VT SMA program. And we had taken a picture for ESPN, and then because the Notre Tech, Tech was playing so well in the Notre Dame game, they never used it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was just being there. I think Jake, you were in that picture with Sean and Darius.
Yes.
That was. Sean Padula's an SMA kid too.
Yes,
right.
So I saw that picture. Bill, I think Bill Roth.
Yeah, Bill tweeted it. Just that was really cool.
A little nugget. Giovanni Heater, who's a freshman in the SMA program. Gio has done some work for us. He's going to do more as time passes. Yep. He's. I'm not going to say he's buddies with Sean Padula, but they know each other by name. So I'm just laying that down there. That's going to be there the next few years.
That'll be fun to watch. Maybe we can get Sean Padula to be a color guy or something for Gio at some point down the road. But I do want to mention Mike Burnup. His call was right after Tim Bickford, who's filling in as the play-by-play broadcaster for Tech. He finished his call. Hokies win. You just hear Mike Burnup. Whoa, Nelly! It is awesome, and I think Mike needs to make shirts of some sort for it.
Where can I hear this?
You can hear it. It's on Learfield Audio on Twitter. You can scroll down. It's probably the 10th tweet on there. You can hear the entire thing.
It was a great call.
Great call. It is awesome. Mike needs to make sure I'm going to tell him tonight at Tech Talk Live. He needs to make it happen.
And what was awesome? I think my favorite moment was getting to go down on the court, I was obviously courtside.
You were right, but Maddox's shot was right in front of you. You had a great
Maddox's, which seems crazy because I thought that was going to be like the moment of Tech's tournament.
Right.
And then that was moment one of Tech's many moments in the tournament. That was like right in front of me. I just happened to be recording. Getting to walk out on the court and take video and pictures and just walk, not even necessarily take video and pictures, but walk in between and just see the interactions of the Virginia Tech team and coaches and players and staff. Mike Young yelling from halfway across the arena, "Yo, where's Mike Burnup?" When they're cutting down the nets to make sure Mike Burnup got a piece of the net.
of it, right?
Bruce Garnes running around with the net draped around his head,
and he was passing out the hats to everybody.
Oh yeah, Kevin Giltner coaching Storm Murphy through cutting down a piece of the net. Mm-hmm. Justin Mutz and Hunter Couture and Storm Murphy, dancing in the middle of the arena. Justin Mutz just sitting there, walking over and embracing the fans. Liam Sment got a fantastic photo of Hunter Couture hugging his mom.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, there were just so many pure moments, and I think that I will always remember just being on the court and getting to experience everything. My favorite video is the one I took when Tech was playing VPI Victory March, and I pan around and Mike Young's there, and Mike Young walked over to the band director and asked for an encore, and MVs gave him an encore, and then Mike Young just fist pumping the entire time.
What stood out to me is something Luke Hancock said. He said, he obviously was around the Tech team for 4 days, and he said culturally Virginia Tech is one of the strongest teams he's ever seen. And
I can see that.
And I think that's extremely important. You don't respond from 10-10 with an ACC title unless you have a strong culture and you have positive personalities. I think positive personality, the power of positive thought in situations like that was very important. I think this team has good chemistry together. They're all likable personalities. Every member of the team has a 3.0 or better. There's just a lot about this team to like besides the fact that they won the ACC. So I just think this is a group of players that the fan base should be able to really relate to, and I think you go back and watch some of the post game interviews on the Hokie Sports video page, and you'll see that 10-minute interview with Storm Murphy, and I think they had one of those with Murphy after the UNC game too. So you heard a lot from Storm Murphy this weekend, and you think future coach when you hear him talk. In a setting like that, because most interviews last like 2 minutes and his last like 10.
Yeah, he was very good and
very
so
perceptive.
So the post championship show on the ACC network, they had Mike Young up there, and who's the guy who was sitting down to the right?
Yeah, Carlos Boozer was on.
Oh, it's Barry.
Oh, it's Joel Barry from
Joel
North
Barry.
Carolina.
Yes.
he asked Storm, I think, about the locker room at the point that Tech, or just everything that was being said at the time that Tech was 2-7 in the conference. And Mike Young stepped in and said, words to the effect of, this isn't a direct quote, words to the effect of, when you're in that situation and people are doing a lot of talking, but what you really want to pay attention to is the locker room, what's being said in the locker room. And then he mimicked a player talking to another player and saying, oh, man, you should be playing more. That guy's an idiot, talking about the coach. And he said, that kind of stuff did not happen. Our team, and he said, we continued to practice well. And, of course, my quote about all of that is that, and I put this in my article today, people asked me, when they were 10-10 and 2-7, people were like, what's wrong with them? And all I could answer was, I'm not really sure. I just know they're not this bad. Mm-hmm. This team is not this bad. I know your record, you are what your record says you are, but I just remember thinking, they're just not this bad.
And while a good chunk of the fan base was busy for most of this season nitpicking every little bit of Storm Murphy's game, they missed the fact that he's the most charismatic player that I've ever seen in the history of Virginia Tech basketball.
Even over Jamon Gordon?
Oh, yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah,
even over Justin Robinson?
Yeah, it's which is tough because I love those guys. But I'm talking from a pure charisma
We're talking tiny degrees of separation.
Right. From the dancing to the play on the court to his interviews, from his locker room presence, probably the most charismatic player that I know of that Tech has had, and I don't think people appreciated that until this past weekend. Maybe I didn't appreciate it until this past weekend.
And you've got to appreciate the value of that. Here's another thing I've said before: once Deron Washington left town, that group of players that Seth had at that point in time, really good players, but they just were not likable as a team.
It was more of a toxic environment.
Yeah.
And what I always heard at the time is like a couple of the key players came in and they were like best friends, but by the end of their career, they didn't like each other, but they were still living with each other.
And they were starters.
And that created toxic vibes. And obviously Seth Greenberg is one of those guys that I like Seth a lot, but it's just his personality type that you get to the end of the season and you need to win a key game. The pressure builds and he tightens up. Mike Young gets loose. He's looser, and as a result, I think his teams play looser. So I just think there was, like I said, the difference between this team and those teams is more positive attitudes, in my opinion.
Let's not let this little nugget get away. Mike Young is 6-0 in conference championship games.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you watch that series about the ACC tournament, a number of coaches had to go to it one or two or more times before they finally won it. Mike Young got it first time out of the game.
6-0 in championship games. So if we make the national title game, we're going to win.
And I think people sometimes can forget that game that sent Tech to 2-7 was the Charlie Moore buzzer beater from half court.
Yeah.
And I remember saying after that game, I said, that's the one that breaks you. And it actually was the one that brought them closer together and sent them on this run.
You got to think they're a more mentally tough team now than they would have been had they not gone through all that. And we'll say, we talked earlier in the season about Tech being one of the unluckiest teams in the country because there actually is a metric for that. Right. And Tech lost games. They lost to Xavier on a last-second shot. They lost to Miami on a last-second shot. They missed a last-second shot against UVA. So they were 0-3 in games that came down to the final possession. And that's kind of a bad luck stat. But then over the last 2 weeks, guess what? They're 2-0 in games that came down to the final possession. So generally basketball seasons come full circle.
And it's all about the timing of what
it's all about the timing of exactly.
An unbelievable week for the men's basketball team. Again, they will face Texas in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Women's team has Florida Gulf Coast. Just scrolled through the YouTube chat. We got to pretty much everything, I think, except we have to bring up, maybe lost in the shuffle of everything that went on with the men's basketball team, 2 national champions in track and field this weekend. Lindsey Butler.
I knew about one.
Yes,
Pole vault and 800 meters.
800 meters.
Both of them, of course, came in the first half of both the Virginia Tech games. So it got lost in the shuffle.
Got totally lost.
So it's very right to talk about it right here.
Yes, Lindsey Butler, 800-meter final, 2 minutes, 1 second, which... That's unbelievable. 800 meters is half a mile.
Yeah, it is. I ran the 800 meter in high school, and I don't remember what I run, It was not close to 201. I can tell you that.
And then Rachel Baxter, who I want to say broke the ACC record in the ACCs. She won the national championship in pole vault.
Yeah.
So those are your 2 national champions, and then 14 All-Americans, I believe, is the number for
so.
the track and field team.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody in Hokie Sports yesterday. Just unfortunate that both of the national champions were announced in like the first 10 minutes of the Notre Dame and Clemson or Notre Dame and North Carolina games, because nobody was really paying attention. Like that's just what happens. But I know Hokie Sports is obviously gonna honor them the right way. And I mean, track and field had an amazing year.
And they're not done because their outdoor season is just starting now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So great weekend this weekend for Virginia Tech, obviously. 2 national champions. First ever men's basketball ACC championship. One more from the YouTube
I've
chat.
got the YouTube chat, yeah. And I think this brings up a point, kind of what Chris wrote about yesterday. Eddie Bose asks, how much of the recent success in all of the sports at Virginia Tech can be attributed to the success of the Drive for 25? And Jacob Yates, to go off of that, he said, same question, but Whit Babcock.
Yeah, okay. Great question. And I do want to address this, and I wrote this in my article yesterday. For as much criticism as Whit takes for maybe his stewardship of the football program, some of which I think has been fair, some of it maybe not so fair, he deserves ultimate credit for Virginia Tech's basketball program and the success in all sports. But I really want to talk about basketball since that's the subject of the day. You know, ever since Whit got to Virginia Tech, our basketball program has done a complete 180. We never knew how good we could be in basketball because we'd never tried to be good. Like Seth Greenberg ended up being a good coach on the whole for Virginia Tech, but it's like he was the fallback guy. He was a guy we hired from South Florida who a lot of people thought if he had stayed at South Florida for another year, he was going to get fired.
The posse was closing in at South Florida.
He was the cheaper option for all the guys that Virginia Tech was going after, and quite frankly, we got lucky with how good he turned out to be, considering what his career record was up to that point. It was just the right fit for him, I think, in terms of what we needed at the time. Then he probably stayed a little too long. But we had never gone for it in basketball before. We didn't know how good we could be. I always thought we could be better than we were if we dedicated the right resources to it. And by God, Whit got here and went on to hire Buzz Williams. We got him away from a basketball program like Marquette, and we paid him way more than Virginia Tech basketball coaches had ever been paid. We gave him a massive staff. If you go back and look at those team pictures, we had twice as many staff members on those teams as we did players.
That's when they invested in chairs for everybody sitting on the bench.
Yeah, and so that, you know, they put a little bit more money into the Han Hurst facility in terms of the presentation on the inside, and they just threw resources at the basketball program. I think we all needed to know how good Virginia Tech could be in basketball because I didn't know. Now I know. And it's 3 NCAA tournaments in a row, which Tech had never made at the time, and a Sweet 16, which Tech had never done. And then Buzz left, and that's okay because he fulfilled his mission. He told us exactly how good we can be in basketball, and now we know. And then Whit replaced him with Mike Young, which in hindsight was an outstanding hire, and now we have an ACC tournament championship. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, like, Whit Babcock is like, he's like the father of the basketball program now, to a certain extent. I mean, he's created it. It's been a complete 180 ever since he took over. And so he takes heat for football sometimes. It's only fair to give him complete credit for what's happened to Virginia Tech's basketball program.
And I think you touched on it in your story you wrote yesterday, seeing the picture Brett, his son, posted. Yep. And it was cool. I was talking with Brett a little bit before the game, and we were both. He was like, "How do you feel?" And I was like, "I think Tech can do it." And I know Brett was really excited to be there, and I know Whit was too. I was standing right there when Brett took that photo. I watched Whit climb up and climb back down the ladder, and he was emotional, as he should be. But he came down, and he just looked at me, and he gave me a big fist bump. And you know, like, I know how stressful it can, an athletic director can be at times, but when you know, I know football for him in the last couple months has been very stressful. I mean, he hired a new football coach in December. But the rewards that come with winning an ACC championship for an athletic director, I'm sure it's just pure relief and elation.
Whit hates losing. I've heard he is, after some football games, he's pretty much unapproachable. And I mean that as a compliment. He hates losing that much. So, I know the first half of this, or the first 2/3 of this basketball season, were very frustrating for him. I'm sure, especially coming off the football season.
Because people were questioning the hire.
People were questioning the hire. Well, guess what? They're not questioning it now. So I'm happy for him because it validates all the decisions he's made in the program. And, I said earlier, I think our basketball program has a high ceiling. Like, if you want to, I'm not saying they're going to win a national championship, but the flagship program in this university is football, yet football does not have a chance to win a national championship. But basketball does. And I think whatever, within reason, if we think we need something, whether it's renovation of Castle or whether it's an extra staff member or whether it's more money to if we need to hire a new assistant, more money for that, I think whatever Mike Young needs or asks for, we need to realistically, within reason, give it to him. Because even if it comes at the expense of football, in my opinion, because we have a higher ceiling in basketball, we have a better chance to win a national championship in men's basketball. And Mike Young is 57 years old, which is still plenty enough time to win a lot of basketball games at Virginia Tech. But at the same time, like, it's not like he's a 40-year-old coach and we got 30 years of Mike Young. This is going to be great. In the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively short window. Yeah. Go for it. Take advantage of it while you have the opportunity and go all in on it. That's what I think I would try to do.
Hokies finally got their first ACC championship. Obviously, you're going to win an NCAA championship. Probably have to start this season a little bit stronger to get one of those top seeds, but they're going to try and make a run this year. Again, Texas, 4:30 p.m. starts their tournament run. We're almost at 2 hours here on episode 229 of the Tech Sideline Podcast.
Close to a record, probably.
A lot to talk about, obviously.
Oh, Jeff Holland holds the record.
Oh, does he?
I don't know how long he and I were on that podcast. It may have been 2.5 hours. But it included bathroom breaks because we were also drinking beer.
Well, we talked about how much is coming up this weekend for Virginia Tech sports. What's coming up for Tech Sideline, guys?
I don't know. I haven't even thought about it.
I think we're gonna have like a quick staff meeting after this to figure out our travel plans and what's going on.
Right.
I guess so. I think I'm gonna write something up about how I feel about playing Texas and the seeding and how I feel like Tech has a good chance and everybody felt like Tech got screwed with an 11 seed. I think it's great that they got an 11 seed. It's much better.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, if you're not going to be like one of the top 5 seeds, either be a 6 or an 11.
Don't be an 8-9.
Or even a 7-10.
7-10, because you got to play 2 seed.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like where Tech landed.
It's going to be Texas and then either Purdue or Yale this weekend for Tech to try and advance to a Sweet 16. Again, 5th straight NCAA tournament appearance for the Hokies.
Yeah, they weren't going to make it the year that COVID canceled it, but, do not minimize that. Chris was just talking about the success of the basketball program. Do not minimize for Virginia Tech historically to go to 5 straight NCAA tournaments.
Never been done.
Well,
I'm telling you, man.
They had never made 3 in a row before
now
Buzz got here.
it's 5.
And frankly, they had barely made 5 in the entire history of their program.
Exactly. I think they made like 7 or 8 before.
Yeah.
Well, and let's not also forget, last year was the first time that the men's and women's team both made it in the same year. Now they've done it 2 years in a row.
Before Whit Babcock got here, we were making the tournament about once a decade.
Yeah.
We made it, I guess, when you were probably a junior or senior in college, 86, 87.
A couple times, actually, when I was in school.
Right, but that last year, and then we basically had to wait almost 10 years to make another one in 95, 96, and then we had to wait 11 years to make another one in 2007, 2008, and then we had to wait another decade until Buzz got here until we made another one. So it was basically like once every 10 years Tech made the NCAA tournament. Yeah. And now we've made it, whether you want to call it 5 out of 5 or 5 out of 6,
5
whatever.
tournaments
It doesn't matter. It's a lot.
5 brackets straight have had Tech's name in it.
So like don't overlook the fact that we are in right now the golden age of Virginia Tech basketball. And I know a lot of people that grew up in the 80s would disagree with that, but in terms of NCAA tournament appearances, which is the most important thing in my opinion, we are in the golden age of Virginia Tech basketball, and that's because of Whit Babcock, in my opinion.
Hokies going to try and avoid going one and done in the tournament. for the second straight year. Lost to Florida last year. Again, Texas on Friday. Anything else, guys, before we wrap up here on episode 229?
I don't think so.
I think that'll do it. I think we covered almost everything. You go 2 hours, you're probably going to.
Softball swept Syracuse.
Softball swept Syracuse. And again,
as expected.
Their home opener in the ACC is this weekend against North Carolina.
And North Carolina is a fair to Midland softball program.
Yes, so should be another good one again. They've been great this year.
Yeah, they're 6-0 in the ACC right now, and I don't know if the new rankings are out, but they were 6th in the country last week.
Yep, been top 10 all year long.
Yeah.
So that'll wrap things up here on episode 229 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, looking back at Virginia Tech's magical run to their first ever ACC tournament championship in men's basketball. I want to thank everybody for listening and everybody on set. Will Stewart across the way. Find him on Twitter at Will Stewart TSL. Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. At the real D Cunna over there. He came in. Long weekend for David. I'm sure another long one awaiting
Stellar
you.
job.
He's done a great job. Covered the women's tournament, the men's tournament, and now heading to go cover the NCAA tournament as well. If you want a good recap of everything that happened in Brooklyn, just scroll through his Twitter feed at the real D Cunna. Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes always does a great job as our producer, and I'm your host Jake Lyman. Signing off. You're on episode 229 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We'll see you next time, Hokies fans.